call the Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Mr Chairman, and I'm going to refer to subpart 2 of part 2 here, and it relates to details of freedom camping on conservation land. And it starts off very well, I have to say. Freedom camping is permitted on any conservation land unless freedom camping is restricted on or prohibited on the land. So then it goes through a process of, the Director-General may, by erecting a sign, etc., 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 and goes around, and then the Director-General may, by notice published in accordance. And then it goes on to say how the good people of New Zealand will be informed of this. A notice must define the conservation land, and then it must be published in the Gazette. Well, that's a good publication, widely read in New Zealand circles. I know all my hunting, fishing and surfing friends, they always read the Gazette. But to be fair, we have to be fair to the Minister. It can be published in the following newspapers, of course. In a daily newspaper circulating in each of the cities of Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch and Dunedin. Or, not and, or, if the Director-General is satisfied that the notice is of local or regional interest only. So we're going to have laws that affect, for the most part, areas right out around in regional New Zealand, but you may not have a requirement for the Minister, not you, Mr Chairman, there may not be a requirement for there to be notification in any of the newspapers in the areas where the freedom camping will be actually banned. What sort of consultation process or what sort of authoritarian regime are we setting up here? Look, it is just bizarre. I know now that regional and provincial newspapers get up in arms quite often about the lack of consultation, about the arrogance of shiny bums, as they say, who sit on their chuffs in Wellington and make these laws. And I guess we're one of them too, I suppose, now. We spend long enough up here. Make laws and impose them on the good people up and down this country. People who understand, people who go out and enjoy it. The fishermen, the fishers, the hunters, as I say, the surfers, all of those people. Yet, the people, and I have to say it's the National Act Party people, who want to impose this law have said, no, it's okay, you can notify people, and the Māori Party too, that's right. Actually, that's scandalous. I just made me realise that. Māori people will be criminalised for going and parking up on their beaches and in their camp and by their rivers. How could the Māori Party support this? How could they support such draconian, authoritarian and quite arrogant legislation? For people who might have, it's understandable, the National Party enact, they might have 3 or 4 toilets in their own home and can't understand why you shouldn't be able to go somewhere and go to the toilet. But the Māori Party people, too many I know in Northland in particular, don't have ready access, not in every home in fact. And so understand the ways of working with nature. You could call it composting, you could call it whatever, but a good shovel and a spade can address the issues of effluent. You can understand that National Act can't quite get a head around. But anyway, they have said that the newspapers circulating in the cities will be good enough to inform people of the areas that will be banned from freedom camping. That is outrageous. It goes right to the core of Wellington arrogance. The kind of criticism that we as politicians get every single day when we're out in the provinces. You don't understand in Wellington. They have no idea what's going on. That's what they say. Well, I'll be quite right here. And in fact, those good people, because they don't always hop in their cars and rush to the city for a holiday, many of them just travel down the road to another part of beautiful New Zealand, to wilderness, from Westport to Punakaiki, or from Nelson down to Fox Glacier, or anywhere like that, out on to Gillespie's Beach. There are many, many options. But they may not know, may have had no notification whatsoever until they arrive at the place, and there may or may not be a sign, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, there may not be a sign. Thank you. There. And so their planned journey and experience in wilderness New Zealand or in beautiful New Zealand will come to a grinding halt. They have to make a call. Well, do we commit a legal act here, or do we stay as we were planning to do and have no impact on the environment because they might have brought a shovel? They may in fact be self-contained. Who knows? But someone in Wellington has decided, in conjunction with the local council, that notice, or the Minister of Conservation in this particular case, this is conservation land, the Minister has decided, given advice from the Director General, that these areas shall be out of bounds. These areas shall be banned from camping, and she or he or the department will then issue a notice in a daily newspaper circulating in each of the cities, Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch and Dunedin. What about Nelson? Did the Honourable Nick Smith insist on Nelson? Maybe he should have, given that he brought this legislation into the House. What about Nelson? What about Timaru, Invercargill, Westport, Greymouth? None of those places will have mandatory notification from their newspapers because it says, or if the Director General is satisfied. Well, can the Minister get up and give an absolute guarantee that the provincial newspapers and the people in the provinces will have fair notice of her draconian legislation to ban people from the conservation estate that they fund, that they have fought for, that they uphold as being sacred in this country, and the Minister's going to ban them from staying overnight? Well, I have to say, this is what the legislation says, Minister, and if you can get up and guarantee that notice will be given to all of the provincial papers, then maybe we've made one step forward. But the legislation, as stated here, does not say that. And just as my colleague Stuart Nash said, there will be interesting legal battles over what is a short-term park or a long-term park or whatever, and the difference between what is perceived in provincial New Zealand and what is perceived in urban New Zealand. Huge void there, not covered by the legislation, and the Minister hasn't got up and attempted to answer that in any way. This is just one of the many, many flaws in a piece of legislation that is a sledgehammer attempting to crack a walnut. Just wind back, Minister, and perhaps take on board the SOP put up by my colleague and say, yes, we shall have a law around harming nature, harming the conservation estate, but we're not going to make a judgment on the input side of it. So that whether you're staying in a V-dub, as many used to in the old days, or a combi, or moving right along to a Bedford van, or nowadays to a fully compliant and self-contained Mercedes van. Technology has moved on, and we have found better ways of mitigating the impact of all of our behaviour, in fact, reducing carbon, getting better at saving energy, and indeed in the area of camping, we are better able to manage the potential effects of that. And that's what we should be moving to do, to encourage people to give by notice fair warning, but not to in fact impose a penalty for something that is at the heart of the New Zealand way of life, something we've, as I say, many have fought for and expected to see for their lifetimes. But unfortunately now, in this one subsection 2, we see potential behaviour by a Minister of Conservation and by a department that through notice in the main newspapers of the main cities will deem areas to be out of bounds. I think it's outrageous, and the Minister should get up and explain why you're doing this, or change it and take on board the SOP put up by my colleague Phil Twyford.